Hi, hello everybody. My name is Daniela Falecki and I'm the founder of Teacher Wellbeing, and I feel very privileged to have so many of you choose to spend your afternoon with me here today as we take the guesswork out of mentoring. So I've got a lot of things to share with you and obviously a very short time. This will be recorded, and so you will be sent a copy of that recording and feel free to move through it and pause where required for you as well. So let's jump straight into things here. Oh, let's go back into here. So I'm just curious, and feel free to use the chat to do this. But if you want to just type in the chat there, like who's been a mentor, who's already mentoring, and who has been mentored. So can you just perhaps write in the chat for me there, who has been mentored and being a mentor versus mentored. And I think what's really interesting here, I love these little memes. Those of you that haven't worked with me before, I'm a little bit cheeky. I'm a teacher, so you will get used to me. But I do like this, this whole thing of, I'm too busy to mentor, and but then we have all this stuff that goes on in our mind. So this concept of mentoring is a really interesting thing in education, because we're very good at teaching and we're very good at education, but when we start looking at mentoring, it's quite a different skill. And so we need to be mindful of what we do and how we use it as well. And the reality is that people are complicated. And I don't know what your experience is of mentoring, but pretty much there can be situations where sometimes I feel like I'm pulling people. And so that's, you feel like you're going in different directions, where I think you need to work on numeracy and literacy, and well, you think you need to work on, perhaps something different, giving feedback to students. And then we've got this side here where you've got people that are completely disengaged as well. So can I just check for some people, is it okay for people to mute themselves? If you want to jump in and speak to me, by all means do so. But if you're perhaps not speaking with me, if you can pop yourself on mute, that'll be really awesome. Thank you so much. So we've got basically people are complicated, and what we want is we want people to enjoy being at work. We want people to be collegial. We want people to actually like each other, because we spend a lot of time there. And so why am I here today talking to you about this? Well, I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for nearly 30 years. So I live here in Sydney, in Australia, in New South Wales, and I was a full-time teacher for many, many years in the government system, independent system as well. And for the last 10 years, I've been specialising in staff wellbeing. My company is called Teacher Wellbeing, and I travel around Australia and in fact the world, working with teachers to help them feel better and function better in the workplace. And a big part of what I do in the teacher wellbeing space is not help people function better outside of school, it's how to function better at school. So it's about wellbeing at work. But part of that, and this is where I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I've been an internationally accredited coach for about 15 years. I've done executive coaching courses at Sydney University. I've been registered with the International Coaching Federation for the last 15 years. I've done 3-year diplomas in life coaching. I've done diplomas in executive coaching, transpersonal coaching, NLP coaching, and many other different coaching courses. And to me, one of the missing pieces in staff wellbeing is the language we use to communicate with ourselves and communicate with others. So that's where the mentoring piece comes in for me, and what I want to share with you here today. And you can find out more about me and all the resources and things that I share, podcasts, free things you can download, and lots of bits and pieces all on the website. But that just gives you context of my teaching experience. And then also the fact that as I was building my own company, I spent 10 years lecturing at Western Sydney University. And in fact, I wrote the mentoring program for Western Sydney University for supervising teachers on how to mentor pre-service teachers. And that was an online module that has been going for about 10 years. And I created all the resources for that 10 years ago as well. So it's just one of those areas that sometimes people consider me the well-being lady. It's like, yeah, but well-being is more about how do I be as a human, how do I connect as a human, and then also how do I feel good and function well at work. And so this is where I want to jump into this whole performance-based conversations. And the overarching foundation of what I want to share is this question. When people are having performance conversations in your workplaces, are people leaving that conversation feeling engaged and inspired, or are they leaving that conversation as a ticker box experience? I get conflicting things when I speak to educators, but I can tell you that 80% of the time, it's a ticker box experience. People would like to think that people leave feeling engaged, but the reality is that in the busyness, time poor, competing demands, it just doesn't happen as well as it could. And I really think it's a missing opportunity for us to boost staff morale and boost the conversations that we actually have. And so some of the things that I'm hearing in this space from mentors are things like, well, I just don't know where to start. People are saying, well, I speak to people and I mentor them, but they don't do anything. They don't take any action. Or they'll say, I feel like I'm doing all the heavy thinking. They're just not participating in their own process. Or they'll say, I'm solving everyone else's problems and I'm doing all the work and they're not doing anything. And now I'm burning out because I'm trying to carry them. Or they might say, I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing. Can you relate to any of those things? And the types of things that perhaps you've said, or the types of things that you're hearing from other people as well. And so why is this happening? And again, when we think about, well, why, what are some of the things that are happening in the background there? So why do mentors feel like they don't have the time skills, or they feel like they're doing all the heavy thinking? And a lot of it is to do with the fact that mentors are often voluntold, which is you're in a leadership position and now you've got a team and now you need to mentor these people. And so, well, I didn't choose them, they didn't choose me, and now I'm in this new role and I don't necessarily have the skills to do it. So that can lead to feelings of disconnect. It can lead to feelings of potential incompetence and uncertainty. Also, the fact that we don't get taught coaching skills. People think that because we're an educator specializing pedagogy over here, that's just going to translate into having conversations with adults. But the conversations we had with young people are a different tone to the conversations that we have with adults. They're different skill sets. So they don't translate over. And if we don't know the difference between those, then what happens is I'm having adult conversations, but I'm speaking to my colleagues like I would year six, and it leaves people feeling patronized. So that can be a very difficult place to be in as well. Also, mentors face competing time pressures. I don't need to explain that one to you. You know that you're juggling 1,000 different things at the same time. Not only do you have probably a teaching load, but you've also got a leadership load, and now you're doing mentoring as well. So juggling all of these things can be time consuming and put a lot of pressure on you. Also, the fact that mentors can experience awkward power dynamics. So here I am with my BFF that we hang out, we vent with, we laugh with, but now I've got to mentor them. And so we find it difficult to wear the two hats at the same time. Then, of course, there's, as a mentor, I might be unclear on, well, what is my role? And what are the expectations? And when do I have to put the hat on and when do I have to put the hat off? So getting clear about those things are pretty important. And of course, one of the biggest ones is the fact that we all have an inner critic. And we suffer from this thing called self-doubt. So being mindful about that is really important. I'm always challenging myself and saying, well, am I being good enough? And I don't really know. And so I am curious to hear, and again, if there's anybody who would like to pop themselves off mute or would like to share. I recognize that some people don't want to, might be driving, or it's at the end of the term, end of the day, and people might not have the capacity. But how does mentoring happen at your school, and what works well, and any particular common challenges that you would like to share? Is there anybody who would like to pop themselves off mute to do that? I'll give people a couple of seconds. Like I said, if you don't want to and can't, that's absolutely okay. I'll share with you my experiences, but I'll give you a moment. All right. It's interesting. I was talking to a principal in Queensland the other day, and I said, how does mentoring happen in your school? And she said, well, we can't do classroom observations because if we want to do classroom observations, we need to submit to the union 6 months prior before we do an observation. I said, 6 months? She said, yeah, so we don't do them. Then there was also, I spoke to a different principal who said, I said, how do you do performance review conversations? She said, oh, well, we don't really do conversations, but we send everybody a form, they fill it in themselves and they send it back to us with their goals. And I said, does everybody do that? And they said, no, it's not mandatory. I said, so half the people send you their goals and some people don't. She said, that's correct. It's an invitation. I said, so how do you support people in their growth? She said, it's very difficult to do. I was then speaking to another principal at another school in Sydney, and they have created a process, and this was a government school, where they have created a process where every school leader, so there's 10 school leaders, is allocated a team of 5 to 6 people in their team, and they get given 20 minutes a week to go into another person's classroom, have a conversation before that, do an observation, then have a conversation afterwards. And they do that every week for 5 weeks with the same person, and then move on to another person, and another person. Why am I sharing this with you? Because the differences in what people do is this large. Some people are doing nothing and some people are doing a lot. It doesn't matter what you do. I think it's really important to do something. It's always working within your context, always working within your parameters. But I want to highlight to you today how important it is to be having these conversations, because we need them. And when we start talking about staff well-being, we need to acknowledge the fact that people are tired, people are exhausted, people are over it, workload is high, people are struggling. And while there are many things that are out of our control, there are some things that are in our control. And so if we unpack, well, what's really happening in schools in the mentoring space, it's pretty evident what I just shared with you, and this comes from an AITSL report, that 90% of Australian schools report that they have mentoring programs, yet they're very inconsistent and they vary significantly. We've got a lot of mentoring happens with early career teacher programs, but a lot of early career teachers find those programs ineffective, because what they want is help in this particular area, but they're given help in that area, which doesn't meet their needs. Then, of course, you've got teachers who report feeling unsupported by colleagues are 3 times more likely to experience burnout. So here we have a direct correlation between mentoring conversations and staff well-being. Lack of professional support is one of the top 3 reasons why people consider leaving the profession. And then we know that relationships are really important for job satisfaction. Teachers with access to high quality mentoring are more engaged, more confident, more likely to stay. They actually perform better because they want to be there. 61% of teachers said they feel professionally isolated. That's over half of us feel isolated. We're such a community-based organisation. We talk about collaboration, cooperation, community, but we operate in silos. So giving people opportunities to connect is absolutely crucial. And then, of course, positive mentoring relationships are associated with increased efficacy as well. So, which then, of course, reduces anxiety and all the other things that go along with it. So there is a direct correlation. And this is where one of my frustrations becomes apparent, when people will say to me, are you the well-being lady? And I say, well, if you want to call me that, sure. And they say, well, where's the massage tables and are we going to meditate? And I say, wrong workshop. That's not what we'll be doing. And while I have a mindfulness practice and I'm a big advocate of mindfulness, what I want to talk about when I talk about staff well-being is I talk about my energy, and I talk about how I be as a human. It's about being a human being, not a human doing. And how do I function at work? Do I like me at work? And do the people around me like me at work? Or am I part of that 5% that everybody has? And so I don't know, again, what your experience is, but on all the staff wellbeing surveys that I've done and the research that exists around the world in educator wellbeing, And it doesn't matter which school you're at. You can be at a school that has low staff morale or high staff morale, and the feedback will generally be the same. And the number one thing that comes back, people say, I don't feel valued and appreciated. I mean, have you heard that? Have you felt that? Has that been something that's come up for your staff? And this is where mentoring conversations are a perfect opportunity to meet that need to help people feel valued and appreciated. But how do you do it? And why is it so important? Because feeling appreciated isn't just a nice to have. And I don't feel appreciated when you buy me my coffee. It's more than that. The morning tea is wonderful and beautiful, but it doesn't help me with workload, manage difficult parents, or manage student behavior. So I need more rigorous support than that in order to feel appreciated. And so when educators do feel appreciated, they're more likely to bring their energy to work. They're more likely to commit to professional growth. So it's not tokenistic. And they're more likely to collaborate so they don't feel siloed. Then also the fact that when we're talking about organisational responsibility, and we know that Safe Work Australia back in 2019 released information around psychosocial hazards in the workplace, which came from an international standard, ISO 45003, for those of you that are interested. And it's an appendix to work health and safety, where now organisations, all organisations around the world, are required to put measures in place to reduce the psychological harm in the workplace. Recognition in the workplace is one of those psychosocial hazards. So again, it's not a nice to have, it's an absolute necessity. And when we have formal recognition practices, such as mentoring, then all of a sudden we're able to advocate and say we have formal structures in place to help people feel valued and appreciated. It means identifying recognition gaps. It means designing policies and processes. It means training leaders. It means evaluating impact and helping people recognize that the reason they're tired and exhausted and the reason their house at home is upside down because they've given all their energy to work is worth it. How do I know it's worth it if I'm not getting any feedback to say, my energy being really low and me being exhausted has been worth it because look at the impact that I'm having on the people around me. And this is where mentoring builds appreciation. It's an untapped resource that we have available to us. Every conversation is an opportunity for me to influence somebody in a positive way. It's an opportunity for me to merge that gap between compliance and care. Does that make sense to people at the moment? If anyone has a question or a comment, feel free to, like I said, to unmute or pop it in the chat, and I'm more than happy to sort of address any of those particular questions. But I suppose when we again come into, that's almost all the rationale of why and what the links are between staff wellbeing and mentoring. But then let's start diving deeper into the role of mentoring and start looking at the fact that, well, what is it and what is it not? And pretty much here we've got, if we look at what it is and what it's not. So what it is, it's a partnership built on trust and curiosity. It's not a top-down relationship based on judgment or control. It's focusing on empowering, not focusing on fixing and rescuing. And because we have such big hearts as educators, we are really good at rescuing. And so we need to just monitor ourselves in that space. What does rescuing look like? I come in with all the solutions and the answers, when that is not helpful sometimes. It's about asking questions and listening. It's not about telling people what to do. Remember that your colleague is not year 6 or not year 9. So we need to treat them in different ways. We need to show respect in different ways. It's not about supporting someone to find, it is about supporting someone to find their own way. It's not about shaping them into a mini you. So you have to do differentiation this way. Well, not really. You can do it lots of different ways. It's rooted in strengths and appreciation. It's not focused on deficits or mistakes or what's missing. It's highlighting good work. It's not driven by compliance and ticking boxes. And it's encouraging reflection and confidence, not creating dependence or pressure to please. You're not I don't want the mentee to do something to appease me. For example, another school I was working in recently, the leaders were saying, lead was speaking to, was sharing a story, and she said, you know, oh, I spoke to my mentee and I said, oh, look, I'm going to be coming into your classroom next week. Which day suits you? Which class suits you? And they agreed on a time and a class. And then the mentee said to the leader, oh, what do you want me to do in that lesson? And the leader said, whatever you're doing in the normal curriculum, in the normal way, you do that. And they said, no, you tell me what you want me to teach and I will teach that. And it's like, no, I don't want you to change anything. You do not need to please me. I want to come in and support you. I want to walk alongside you. I'm not coming there to judge, evaluate, or assess you. I'm coming to observe and learn with you. And so it was this sense of vulnerability that we have when someone's coming into my classroom is so high. But how are we as mentors managing this other person's vulnerability? How are we creating a space of care? How are we creating a space of awareness? How are we creating a space of psychological safety so I can have this meaningful conversation? And I can tell you, if we don't create that space, it results in a tick box experience. Because what we want to do is we want to build self-determined humans. We want to build self-determination. I want you to be engaged in your own learning. I want you to be excited to be there. I want you to be brave. I want to support you because I care deeply about you. I want to see you do well. I want to support you if you make a mistake and we learn together. It's okay. You know, schools are learning institutions for staff and students. But how are we creating this space to say, how are you going to be brave this term? What things are you going to try that are new? And how will you stretch yourself? And how will you respond if it doesn't go to plan? And in fact, we expect it not to go to plan. And what are you going to do then? And being able to come back as a team and share my vulnerability is a really powerful thing to be able to do. And this stems in self-determination theory, which I'm assuming a lot of people have already heard of. We're very good at this sort of stuff with the students, but we don't often think about this with staff. And self-determination theory comes from motivation theory. So it's about building intrinsic motivation. And basically what they say is that there's 3 psychological needs that we need to meet in order to feel like I'm self-motivated. And the first one is building capability. So I need to have skills. And this is where we need to know the context of our mentoring conversation. For example, am I mentoring somebody that is a novice and I'm the expert? So that's often a supervising teacher with a prac student, and people don't know what they don't know. So is that the context? So that's more of a mentoring conversation. Or am I mentoring somebody that is more skilled, more knowledgeable, and more experienced than me? Then that's probably going to be more of a coaching conversation. So where is the person's capability is really important, and what skills do they need? The second one is giving autonomy. I don't know about you, but I don't like to be told what to do. And I don't know any teachers or educators who like to be told what to do. We like to feel we have choice. And in education, we often feel very micromanaged. And having choice is really important if I'm going to participate in my own journey. And of course, the third one is relationships. We do better together. That is why most of us will pay for a gym membership and not go. But if we have a friend to go with, or we have a personal trainer who keeps us accountable, we're more likely to be motivated and maintain momentum. So when we're having our mentoring conversations, we need to identify what skills or knowledge might this person need, where are we providing autonomy, and how are we providing ongoing relationship and connection? And that's the self-determination piece. But also recognizing, and this is one of the flaws that I think, one of the traps we fall into in education, is we use the words mentoring and coaching interchangeably when they are different. It's a bit like using the word sports coaching on a Saturday with PE teaching. Very different. Just because you coach your under 10 sons basketball team on a Saturday does not mean you can be a PE teacher. Different skill sets. And in education, there is an overlap between mentoring and coaching, but they are very different. And so when we talk, what is the difference? Well, mentoring, as I said, it's more an apprenticeship model. I've got more knowledge than you. You're a novice. So I'm going to ask you questions, but I'm going to advise you because you don't know what you don't know. But when I'm working with a colleague that is just as experienced as me, then I need to be moving more towards a coaching approach, which is asking questions to build that self-determination. So what I generally have created, this is with Western Sydney University, and what I continue to create in the programs with leaders that I work with, is what we want to create is a mentoring program, but how we want to facilitate that is using a coaching approach. So again, we want to create a mentoring program, but we use a coaching approach to facilitate that mentoring program. And that's where we have the overlap between the two. Does that make sense to people? Yeah. And so, for example, to give you another little example with coaching, and this is the case where we don't know what we don't know. And I don't know, have you ever had that experience where someone says, teaching, you just, especially, my background's PE. And it's like, oh, you just stand there and blow a whistle all day. I'm like, yeah, that's all I do. I do no paperwork. I do no emails. I don't do any social and emotional management. I don't help anyone self-regulate, blah, blah, blah. I don't do any curriculum planning, assessment or reporting. I just blow a whistle all day. People don't know what they don't know. And then you say to someone, can you learn to be a teacher in a one-day course? And you go, no, can't do it. Can you learn to be a teacher in primary or high school? Can you learn to be a teacher in a 1-month course? No, can't do it. Can you learn to be a teacher in a 6-week course? No. Can you learn to be a teacher in a 1-year course? No, you cannot. You learn to be a teacher in a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree on top of your existing degree, and then you still have no idea what it's like until you get into the classroom. So you do your 4-year degree in theory, and you've got your degree in how to be an educator. Then in your first year of teaching, when you actually get into the classroom, that's when you really learn how to teach. The same with coaching. You cannot learn coaching in a 1 day, a 1 hour, a 6 hour, a 6-week, or a 1-year course. You learn the theory and then you apply. You will make mistakes. You're supposed to, but we're on a learning journey. But you can't learn it by just reading. You can't learn it just in a course. You need to learn through applying. Does that make sense to people as well? So let me share with you how. What does all this mean? So this is where we get to the, well, now what? Now what? All right, we're getting there. We're getting there. Slowly, slowly. So here are the 3 keys that I think are really powerful as starting points to help us be better mentors so people can feel valued and appreciated. And when they feel valued and appreciated, they feel better and they function better at work. Here are the 3 keys to mentoring. The first one is mindset. Mindset is you need to consider how people think. Every single person you speak to thinks differently. This is where we're drawing on coaching psychology to understand how someone thinks, whether it's behavior styles, personality styles, thinking styles, their inner critic, their negativity bias, whether they know their strengths or not. So how do people think? The second one is consider how people feel. When people leave your conversation, whether it's a 5-minute conversation or a 45-minute conversation, are they leaving feeling energized and inspired? Or are they leaving feeling patronized and dismissed? Really powerful. That doesn't mean we don't hold people accountable. It means how do people leave that conversation? We need to consider how people feel. And the third one is we need to consider how we follow up. We need to consider how we follow up. Okay, so how do we think? How do people think? How do people feel? And how do we follow up? Let me unpack each of these 3 things for you. The first one, consider how people think. Here are some actions, because I know some of you are just tell me what to do. It's like, well, here's your little action thing that you can do. When we're talking about mindset and considering how people think, we need to ask open-ended questions. As educators, we are excellent at asking leading questions because that's what we do with kids. That is not coaching. For example, saying to a student, have you thought about doing it this way? Excellent question. Saying to a colleague, have you thought about doing it this way? Bad question. It's a leading question. There's a difference. Okay. We need to challenge existing narratives. So when someone says, oh, it's always like this. It's like, always? Really? Always? Well, I don't think it's always like that. So we need to challenge. We need to shift mindsets towards possibility. It's like, oh, well, you can't get through to that kid. Well, what can we do? And highlight perspectives and options. Say, well, is there another way we can look at this? And if that's all too confusing, think just give me one thing to focus on, it's this. Use the words could, not should. For example, you say, well, what could you do? Not what should you do. Should is this. You should have known better. You should have gone to the gym. It's like, well, I didn't go to the gym. As opposed to you could have. So could is this, options. Should is this. So could is very William Glasser choice theory. Should is very accusational. Okay, so that's just considering how people think. So that's the first one. The second one is mood. People desperately want to feel valued and appreciated for their hard work. They want to know that they've gone home exhausted for a reason. I think I saw a statistic the other day that people, I think it was something like 60% of teachers received one positive piece of feedback per week from a colleague in a week. The amount of things we do in a week, and so people found one good thing to say to another person. My goodness, a missed opportunity. We need to help people feel valued and appreciated. We need to notice the impact and progress. Remind people that it's worth it. So what's the action? You walk past someone in the corridor and you say to someone, oh my gosh, I noticed the way you spoke to that student and really helped them emotionally or self-regulate. It was amazing. And then carry on. The words here are, I noticed. I noticed you do that. That was amazing. I noticed you did. That was fantastic. I noticed you stayed back and did this. I noticed, just when I feel noticed, I feel seen. When I feel seen, I feel valued. I feel appreciated. And the third one is momentum, which is how people act or how I follow up. It's really important. The language, the nuances here are so powerful. We need to regularly check in, not check up. I'm checking in with you to see how you're going. I'm not checking up on you to see if you've done something. Check in, not check up. We want to scaffold small action steps. We are so hard on ourselves. I speak to educators and I say, what's something you want to work on or improve over this next term? And they say time management. And I go, oh, time management, that sounds important. And I say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your time management skills at the moment? And they say, oh, 5 out of 10. I say, okay, great. I say, so what needs to happen for it to be a 6 out of 10? And they say, oh, well, I've got to be fully on time, get my to-do list done and get everything done and everything right and everything blah, blah, blah. And I go, wow, cool. And then I say, what has to happen to make it a 7 out of 10? And they go, I don't know, because I've already done it at 6. And the point is, we want to go from 5 to 10 straight away, and you can't. Just as kids, when we're looking at their ways of improving, we scaffold small baby steps. We need to do the same for ourselves. Small baby steps. Otherwise, it's too hard, and I'm setting myself up for failure. And so when you're following up for this momentum, it's the word here, the most powerful word here you can use is the word curiosity. I'm curious to find out how you're going with that thing you said you were going to do. I'm curious to see, have you tried that yet? I'm curious to hear what went well and what didn't go well. What can we do next? And that way, that curiosity is a way that I'm checking in because, oh gosh, I'm really curious to see what happened. I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel cared for because you remember. We do this stuff with the kids all the time. We don't do it enough with staff because we get caught in the compliance. We get caught in the ticker box of things that we have to as opposed to what we could do. Yeah. So those 3 things of mindset, how people think, mood, how people feel, momentum, how we follow up. Why are these things important? Why use the keys? because when we shift mindset, we move people from feeling individualistic and siloed into feeling more collegial. When we help people feel valued and appreciated, we move people from feeling overwhelmed and drained to recognize actually it's worth it. And I am making a difference. And I do feel connected to the people around me because they care. And when I follow up and I check in with people, I move from feeling helpless and cynical to feeling empowered and engaged. And that's these things here on the right-hand side effectively are the outcomes of positive staff wellbeing. These things come about through the conversations that we have, not the coffee cart that we purchase. Yeah. So again, just want to give people a moment. I do speak fast. I do go fast because we're educators and we're used to going fast. But just give people a moment if you have any questions to jump in. And I'm going to give people an opportunity for questions at the end as well, but just giving people a moment to process what I've been sharing here. Because the reality is this: every mentoring conversation is an opportunity to boost wellbeing. Every mentoring conversation. It's an opportunity. Your job as a leader is not to make people happy at work. That's not what it's about. It's about creating the conditions where people want to be there. It's about creating the conditions where they want to take ownership of their own behavior. They want to take ownership of how they think and how they feel so they can function better in the context of teaching and learning. That's actually what we're trying to do. And so then we start looking at, well, what are the tools that we can use to do that? And I want to share with you the old way and the new way. Now, when I say old way, no criticism. These things still work for people because remember, it's the conversation. But the reason I share their old way is because of this. They focus on the compliance. So this is a common template that most schools will have where they have, what's a teacher? When are you being observed? What are we going to talk about? Or what are your professional goals? Whether it's called a PDP, professional development plan, a PGIA, performance growth improvement, blah, blah, SPG, IPG, XYZ. Oh my gosh, there are so many different names. It's very confusing for me. I get them all wrong. So I just say goal setting, performance improvement plan. And this is a standard form, what standard are you going to talk about? How does it relate to the strategic plan? Give feedback, blah, blah, boring, boring, boring. Why is it boring? There is no heart in there. It's compliant, judgy, assessing and evaluating. I feel patronized, I feel vulnerable, I don't feel seen, I don't feel valued, and I don't feel appreciated. That is very tokenistic. So what we want to do is, so does it work? It may work for you. If it does, wonderful. From my experience and opinion, if the conversation is worthwhile, that will work. But this doesn't facilitate that kind appreciation conversation. What does is a more smarter way of doing things. And that smarter way, it's an acronym that I've created here. Now, SMART is not new. We've all heard of SMART goals. But what I've done here is I've added the E and R, which is evaluate and reflect. But the biggest piece in here is the A, which is authenticity. And so I've got different frameworks where we say, okay, well, what are the key areas in your school improvement plan? What is one priority area that interests you? Why do you choose this area? So we're building in self-determination. What do you do well and what could you improve in that particular area? And then this is basically a 4-page document that we use as a coaching framework. And then we go into, well, what specifically would you like to improve? How will you measure this? Why does this excite you? And if you say, well, gosh, differentiation doesn't excite me, we go, well, let's go back to the beginning. Let's pick something that does excite you, because if it doesn't excite you, we're not doing it. So we're bringing in the emotive part. Why emotive part? Because it encourages self-determination. What resources will you use? How much time are you going to invest in this? How will you evaluate if you've done it? And how will you reflect? And then there's other coaching models like GROW. If you've done any coaching or mentoring in the past, or certainly any in leadership positions, you would probably be familiar with the GROW framework, which is the most popular coaching model in the world. It's a scaffold that is used in all organizations. And so that just gives you a snapshot of what this looks like when we build in appreciation, we contribute to the relationship, we help people feel valued and appreciated, and so the outcome is then I feel better and I function better at work, which then influences the entire staff well-being philosophy, if you like. And so these, like I said, these are the snapshots, but those three foundations that I wanted to share with you here today were based on considering how people think and shifting the narrative, considering how people feel. Do people leave your conversation feeling valued and appreciated? And then how are you following up? How are you checking in with people afterwards so they feel valued and appreciated? And that's where people say, well, what else? What else? It's like, well, this is a 45-minute session, kids. So it's sharing with you some of the basics and then saying, well, what else is next? And so what I've done is I've created an online self-paced course called Mentoring Made Easy. There's a QR code there for those of you that like to just have a look at what's involved in that course. And you can basically, in that particular course, I share with you all those templates that I've created here. I share with you the models. I share with you how to use them. The modules are very simple. So there's only 6 modules. You know, the difference between mentoring and coaching and education, creating trust, the art of questioning. Then we put it all together in the smarter framework. I unpack that for you and I explain how you use that. But in that program as well, you can see here, so each module is unpacked and each module really only takes about an hour. So the entire course itself is about 6 hours, but you get it for 12 months. And why? 6 hours for 12 months. So you can practice it, because you can't learn it by just downloading the worksheet. You need to do it, and then you need to do it with other people again and again and again and again and again. So you can see they're very basic. It's not content heavy, it's practice heavy. And so the art of questioning, we've got practicing questions, practice active listening, practice active constructive responding, which is how do I respond to people in a positive way, because that's more important than responding to people in a negative way, negative situations. And then, of course, prioritizing scaling, setting smarter goals, and so on. So that is there. This is an example of some of the worksheets that you can download. Works best when you do it with a partner as well. So you get to practice stuff. So as you can see, not content heavy at all. But to summarize here today, before I open up to some questions, I just wanted to remind you of this. And if you just take away one thing, I would like it to be this slide. For you to remember, and share this with your leadership team, please, as well, is that the purpose of mentoring is not to judge and offer feedback. People say, oh, but I've got to do a mentor, I've got to work with my mentee so I can give them feedback. They didn't ask for your feedback, they don't want your feedback. It's not about giving feedback. Stop using the word feedback, okay? Because when I'm coming in to give you feedback, all I hear is you're coming in to judge me. So we need to shift that. We're not assessing. Oh, we're going to assess how our staff are going. No, we don't. We're not deciding if they're in band 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. You're not assessing and ranking them. So we need to stop using that language. And we're not evaluating colleagues either. I'm not evaluating if you're doing it right or wrong. And I'm not solely going in to set a goal for compliance sake because the department said, or Catholic education said, or our school said that we have to have a goal. So people go, what's my goal? Oh, I don't know what my goal is. Oh, I'll just make it about numeracy and literacy. It's like, yeah, but where's the ownership? So it's not about just setting a goal. What it is about observing, learning, and sharing insights. It's about I noticed, my gosh, the incredible thing that you did here. I noticed that you tried that. It didn't quite go to plan. What can we do different next time? It's about highlighting decision-making and its impact when something works and when it doesn't work. It's about helping people learn, celebrate, and grow, because our job is never done, it's never finished, and it never ends. So who are we judging, assessing, and evaluating? That's not what it's about. We assess and evaluate student learning, absolutely. We do not assess and evaluate teaching. We observe, we learn, and we share insights. Very different. We help people feel valued and appreciated for their good work. And the purpose is to inspire, empower, and engage people in their own development. I want you to like coming to work. I want you to love your job. I want you to engage in it. I want you to try new things, and I want you to be brave enough to come to me when we can learn together. I want to hear what worked for you. I want to share what worked for me. And maybe if we stopped operating in silos, we would actually have more energy and feel more connected to the people around us. And of course, why is this so important? To better support young people with quality teaching and learning. That's actually why we're there. Mentoring exists to improve teaching and learning, but we don't do it through judging, assessing, and evaluating each other. We do it through supporting, connecting, and inspiring each other. Very different between the two things. And so to summarize all of that in one beautiful statement is people will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And at the end of the day, we are human beings, not human doings. And while we live our life based on our to-do list, we are much more important than our to-do list. And so I hope that that's given you some insights into why we mentor, the challenges we experience, what we need to be doing to shift some of those narratives in how we think, how we feel, and how we check in with people. Of course, there's so much more that I would like to share, but haven't got the time here at the moment. But I will stop sharing my screen for a moment and then open up to the floor if there was anybody who would like to ask a question or have any feedback or comments, please feel free to do so. You can write it in the chat if you wanted to as well. I love reading all the chats. Yeah, so we've got a few people here who've mentored. And of course, like I said, this will be recorded. But I hope that that's giving you some things to think about and also some things to take away, and maybe some things you can share with your leadership team as well. And like I said, if there's more questions, feel free to reach out at any point in time, and I'm happy to share more where I can.